This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
Hi, my name is Igor Kheifets, and this is The List Building Lifestyle, the only podcast which delivers cutting-edge conversion strategies from the online trenches straight to your earbuds. Download the transcript of today's episode and all future episodes at listbuildinglifestyleshow.com. I also invite you to grab a free copy of the Wealthy List Builder Survival Guide at listbuildinglifestyleshow.com/survival. And now, once again, it's time to claim your list building lifestyle.
Welcome back to another edition of the List Building Lifestyle Show. You are so lucky that you are here because I have your Uncle Igor.
Uncle Igor in the house. Yeah. That's. I'm sticking to Uncle Igor. I like that because it gives you a warm feel. It's like you feel like you know Igor because he's your uncle.
He's Uncle Igor. He'll take care of you. Come here, son. I'm going to show you the ropes.
Nice. And yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do because, I mean, when it comes to email marketing, how many times do you see really bad subject lines in your inbox? How many times do you see seasoned marketers send out really crappy subject lines that bomb? How many times did you send out a subject line that you thought is going to just kill it, but it never pulled anything decent or worth reporting on? I don't know about you, Jonathan. Honestly, for me, it happened more than once. So I ended up developing a set of rules I should not break. Specifically with this episode, what I want to do is I want to tell you about the mistakes I've made so you can, experience the pleasure of making less of those mistakes and benefiting from making more money with your emails.
All right, you got me. And yes, I've had my fair share of bombed subject lines, so I definitely could use some help in this department.
Yeah, and this is really important too because subject lines can really make or break the email. I mean, sometimes really, depending on who's sending out the email, you can open any subject line. Like if Ben Settle sends out an email, I pretty much open it. If you send out an email, I pretty much open that as well because we have a relationship. However, when it comes to list building cold, right? When it comes to building your audience, subject lines play a critical role. So what I want to do, I want to give you 5 ways that I screwed up my subject lines so you know what not to do. First one being using clickbait and misleading subjects. So what I mean is using subject lines that tell people that they're supposed to claim their commissions, that there's like photos enclosed and stuff like that. So anything that misleads them or tries to trick them into opening the email, while it may pay off once or twice in terms of getting you higher open rates today, I assure you that starting tomorrow, your open rates will drop significantly because, your email subscribers, they're like elephants. They remember everything. So if you violate their trust once, they will take it personally and they will stop reading your emails. And sometimes even if your next subject line is going to be really good, they will not read it just to spite you. I am not kidding. It sounds sort of an exaggeration, but email subscribers, they take this stuff personally, and you should not violate their trust using clickbait subject lines.
Bro, because you mentioned Ben Settle all the time. I was in a mastermind, a really high-level mastermind a few months ago, and the subject of emails and Ben Settle came up, and this guy who's really successful, he's a doctor, he just pipes right up and says, "I hate Ben Settle. I don't read his emails anymore." What, Ben? Come on, man. And so when we ask him what's up, he says, every time that guy writes a subject line, I have to open the email, and then half the time it has nothing to do with it. You and I know that he ties it in somewhere, but that is that elephant memory that you're talking about. There was one that didn't hit him right, and he'll never forget it.
That's right. And, Ben always talks about, being aggressive with your subject lines, but always paying it off real quick. Apparently, he hit on the one email where Ben did not do it, or maybe, did not do a good job of it. So, but yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about, especially when it comes to sophisticated people, like people who are smart and busy. They don't give you a second chance. They often will discard the entire relationship based on one clickbait subject line. They prefer you to suck, but to be honest about it, and then to try to sort of like cover up on your inability to write a decent subject line by just lying through your teeth.
Nice.
So the second one, the second way you can screw up your subject lines is to write your subject line before writing the actual email. Now, this is something I've done for almost 3 years until I finally realized that I was going basically backwards about it. Because what happens is when you write your subject line before you write the email, all of a sudden you lock yourself up. You have to make the email work by writing about the thing you mentioned in the subject line. But when you do it the other way around, what happens is, first of all, you're free roaming. You can write about anything, and as you're writing, you can suddenly hit on that perfect direction that was not available to you or you weren't aware of when you started writing the email. So it only came to you like halfway through. Then you kind of remove the first half and then you take it to a whole new direction, and you end up writing a great email, and the subject line almost writes itself at that point. Like so many times I noticed that whenever I wrote an email, after writing that subject line, it became a really painful process of trying to adapt the content of the email to the subject. And I also was limited to really being specific too, right? Like I couldn't really do anything else but talk about whatever was mentioned in the subject line. The subject line itself, all of a sudden, wasn't really exciting. Now, when I wrote the email first and then I was able to pull the right subject line out of that, all of a sudden I could use any of the dozens of the subject line formulas I can use and to adapt any formula to what I had written. Again, it's just you're not limiting yourself that way. You have more creative freedom, and you can produce much better email copy if you write the subject line last, not first.
I like that one. I often, when I'm writing an email, I just put a placeholder on the subject line. And what I end up doing is just cutting and pasting something from the body to replace that placeholder that I put for the subject line. So great stuff there.
Yeah, and it's a really easy way to really shortcut your time. And oftentimes, I bet your subject line is good enough for that email to pull through, because when you write the email itself, you usually kind of hit on all the right points. So you already done the complicated job, right? All you have to do is just enjoy the fruits of your labor, so to speak.
Yeah.
So the third mistake is being funny or clever. Really common one. You wouldn't believe how common. And oftentimes, what happens is people get distracted from the purpose of the email, which is to go and buy something from you. And the other thing that happens, the other downside to that is oftentimes it doesn't hit. So in other words, you know how you ever told a joke or said a funny remark to somebody and you noticed that it didn't register? And sometimes they don't laugh, or sometimes they laughed but sort of out of politeness.
Yeah, that's the story of my life with my wife. She doesn't get me, man.
So with email subject lines, the same thing happens. The same thing, because you're writing to a large audience coming from all kinds of backgrounds and walks of life. You're writing to different ages, to different sexes, and you're writing to a bunch of different people with a bunch of different belief systems. Now, what are the chances for your writing or for your subject line to be funny? What are the chances that you can make them laugh in 8 words? Very, very low. So don't take that chance. Don't take that shot. Instead, go for what's right. And that is, ask yourself, what do I need to say in my subject line to get them to open it? Right? Your job is not to make them laugh, and your job not to even sell your product at that point, just to get them to open the email without pissing them off.
Come on. Pissing them off sometimes is good also.
Yeah, but pissing the right people off. Of course, you should write emails where you kind of focus on the customer you don't want, and you literally just make fun of them in a really mean and nasty way, as if you're teasing your sister. But pissing them off, like say with the clickbait thing, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to do that.
Yeah. Or the delayed payoff. I agree.
So the other mistake I made often, and I still make sometimes, is trying to cram too much information into the subject line. It comes from your desire to either inform, which is false, which is really bad if you're trying to do email marketing. Don't try to inform anyone of anything. Entertain instead, while slightly informing. Or it comes from insecurity. Because when we're insecure, we say way more when we're not. Right? So if insecure about what you're saying being accepted or being liked or hitting well, right? You try to say more in hopes that you'll hit.
Yeah, that's a big sign. I was reading the game, and that's a big sign of insecurity in guys is when they speak too fast, which falls into saying too much because they are not secure in themselves. So, yeah, I've seen that plenty of times.
Yeah, especially if you were speaking slowly and then you sped up after something happened, right? That's like the big no-no.
Yeah, yeah.
So let me slow down a little bit. I'm just kidding. The last mistake that I want to bring up on this episode, of course, not the last mistake ever, but it is a big one that is worth mentioning, and that is swiping other people's subject lines. Now, we spoke about why you shouldn't swipe other people's emails before, because first, it's a jackass move to begin with, and second, it just won't work. Now, the same thing is true for swiping subjects, because subject lines were written by the person you're swiping from for a certain reason, right? They were written for a certain audience, hitting a certain emotion, perhaps, or a certain desire, and there was some thinking behind it. So that's one reason why it can't work for you or often won't work for you, is because you may have a different audience. Your audience may be aware of different things. They may have a different belief system. So that's one reason not to swipe. The other reason not to swipe is actually because you don't know if that subject line is any freaking good. And this is the biggest reason by far. Because if somebody mails a subject line, oftentimes they're shooting in the dark. They're trying to figure things out. They're not testing. They're not split testing. And I mean, they're not sending out the same subject line to a bunch of different lists with slight variations. They're not doing any of that stuff. All they're doing is just coming up with a subject line and mailing it out. There's absolutely no proof that you can ever get that the subject line you're swiping is any good and that it actually worked. So swiping it, I mean, it doesn't increase your chances. It just shows how lazy you are. That's it. Because you can, I mean, your shots of hitting a good subject and getting a great open rate probably are as high, if not higher, than by swiping from somebody else.
Now, Igor, you said you had some frameworks that you use. So is that different using those frameworks or those templates? Is that different than actually swiping? Or are they just as played out?
Now, that's a great question because, yes, there is a difference between taking a subject line and copying it word for your list versus breaking down a subject line if you know it worked, right? Breaking it down into a formula. Now, that is actually something that Dan Kennedy talks about all the time, that he was the first one to talk about, well, in my universe, where he said, look, what you do is you go to old sales letters that you know performed well, to old controls. That's what they call a sales letter that was mailed as the primary letter that converted the best for a product. You find old controls and you take these headlines. Now, headlines are the subject lines for sales letters, right? So it's pretty much the same thing, with the difference that headlines are usually longer. So what you do, you can create a habit of taking subject lines and headlines and breaking down why they work and then developing formulas out of them. So in the previous episode, we spoke about, one of the previous episodes, we spoke about writing the right email swipe for the solo is your mind. Now, and what I've done is I gave you two subject line formulas. Okay, but these formulas, what's great about them is they hit on a universally effective point, because we all want, like the first one was about how to get something you really want without the thing you really hate, right?
Yeah.
So, that's what we all want. We want the benefit of something, but without the thing we hate. For example, we want the benefit of having sex. I'm talking about guys, young guys. The benefit of having sex, but without commitments, right? Or we want the benefit of making a lot of money, but without working really hard for it, right? Or we want to be able to command respect and admiration from the members of the opposite sex, but we don't want to spend 8 hours a day in the gym like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Okay? So that's just universal, and that's what a formula is. Now, if you're able, and you should be able, in fact, you should be striving to create these formulas for yourself, to identify the formulas, to perhaps purchase the copywriting courses that teach you about these formulas, then you will be able to quickly and easily come up with great subject lines that pull well, and you'll have other people trying to knock your subject lines off and not the other way around.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Understanding the underlying, first of all, if it worked, understanding that, and then understanding the underlying psychology and then adapting it to fit your offer. That's the way I see Swipe, but so many other people see Swipe as, hey, let me just take this whole thing and slap it onto what I'm doing.
Yeah, and Jonathan, it's interesting. Why do we call it a swipe? I mean, it's just the verb is to swipe an email, right? And we call it a swipe because everybody copies from everybody else. But again, if you do what everybody else is doing, then all you're getting is the same result that everybody else is getting. So what instead you want to do is you want to ask yourself, what are the ones who actually make money with emails do? All right, they have formulas. And if you, for example, study my subject lines, oftentimes you will be able to identify my formulas. Now, is it any harm for you to do that? Will it hurt me? No, because you just take the formula and you apply this formula for whatever it is that you're selling. In fact, I'm giving away all of these formulas inside the VIP club. So anytime anyone signs up at solovipclub.com and they start going through the coaching, a big portion of that training is about email marketing, and I give away my formulas. But guess what? I don't care to give them away because you using them successfully does not hurt me in any way, shape, or form.
He's being cocky and confident, people. You better recognize. All right. So anything else as we're wrapping up, Igor?
Well, yeah. So I mentioned this in the episode where we spoke about how to write the perfect email swipe for your solo ad, but I'll mention this again. Swipes, subject lines, emails, they're not difficult if you have your formulas down. So what you want to do, if you're interested in figuring this out, go back in your inbox. Go back to all the emails you received last month from the gurus you follow and see if you can spot the commonalities in the way they write subject lines. Because I assure you, you will be able to do it. For example, if you study Frank Kern's emails, you'll notice that a lot of his stuff is all curiosity-based. And it always comes across as if a personal email, as if that's the actual email that Frank sat down and sent you, and not something he loaded into his autoresponder, right? So that's one style of doing it. And I mean, a lot of his subject lines can be swiped, but then I urge you to find your own style of writing those subject lines, right? Sometimes you can come across a guru that emails with a benefit-heavy formula. So almost every email is just focusing on some sort of benefit, a lot of how-to subject lines, right? So if you study, for example, my emails, you'll notice a lot of how-to subject lines because if I have something that delivers the desired outcome for my prospect, I just put my best foot forward and I say how to get a responsive prospect on your list without losing, the shirt off your back. So again, how to get the thing you want without the thing you hate. Again, formulas. Really simple, really easy. There's no magic here. It's all about the formulas. That's what great subject lines are all about.
I did an interview, and we've talked about it before, with Joe from Agora Financial. And one of the things that he taught me that really blew my mind was the difference between active reading and passive reading. So even in sales letters and emails and all that stuff, passive reading is where you're reading as a prospect and just going through it. Active reading is more of what you're describing in this episode, where you're actively looking for the mechanics, the pieces, the things that make this work so that you can model them.
What you're sharing reminds me of this great phrase I heard from somebody. I think it was Frank Kern who said, "Don't do as I say, do as I do," right? So if you're in the internet marketing space and you're like following all these IM gurus, then what you're better off doing is not to just purchase their courses, although sometimes the courses are really good, and follow the advice. But a lot of times you're better off just what we refer to as funnel hacking in the previous episode, right? You're just observe what they do and always ask yourself the question, why did they say this this way? Why did they position this cover this way? Why did they do things the way they did? And all of a sudden, a whole other world opens up to you, a world that was invisible to you from before, but a world where you literally understand the mechanics of influence in this industry. It is incredible, and I urge you to become an active reader and an active consumer in the IM space, because you will quickly transition from being just a consumer to being a guru.
Ooh, good stuff. That is a wrap for another list building lifestyle show. We'll be back with you next time.
Thank you for listening to the List Building Lifestyle. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes or Google Play to never miss an episode. Because who knows, just one conversion tactic we share on the show might double your list and double your business. Download the transcript of today's episode and all future episodes at listbuildinglifestyleshow.com. And don't forget to claim your complimentary copy of the Wealthy List Builder Survival Guide at listbuildinglifestyleshow.com/survival. This is Igor Kheifets, and until next time we talk, have a good one.
This is the podcastfactory.com.